I am at the hotel in Hong Kong, and last night I had a very interesting dinner with the top Taiwanese entrepreneurs and who have major investments in Taiwan and in China. And I learned a lot of things that only confused me really about Taiwan and China, things that I had no idea that took place. So as we know, Taiwan is a democracy and China is sort of like a Pinochet type regime. I mean, they call it communist, but it's more like what in my part of the world, Latin America, used to be called Pinochetismo, which is a very tightly controlled political system combined with enormous economic freedom. So you have freedom for everything except for politics, which is what they have in China, and a low tax rate and a very, very pro-business environment. And Taiwan instead is more like a social democracy. It's more like a European country with a welfare system, with a lot of the attributes of a welfare democracy. Now the first extremely confusing fact I learned is that the migration patterns are surprisingly greatly in favor of mainland China. That there is 1 million Taiwanese who voluntarily moved to communist China. That I found shocking. At the same time, there's only 3,000 mainland Chinese people who are allowed in Taiwan on every single day, because the Taiwanese seem to be very concerned about Chinese spies, which I find an absolutely paranoid position for a democracy. I mean, if I was concerned of anything, if I was Taiwan, I would be concerned of just tremendous migration, because Taiwan is so much richer on the average than China. But allowing only 3,000 Chinese, that doesn't make any sense to me. So basically it's 1 million one way and 3,000 the other way, and they're only visitors. So that was the first unusual thing. The second thing I learned is that Taiwan had a chance to declare independence, and Chiang Kai-shek refused to declare independence because his dream was to rule over all of China again, which makes it clear to me that then Taiwan is not a different country, because why would you want to be... I never heard of somebody who wanted to be independent from another country which then they wanted to rule, right? So it would be as if the Basques wanted to be independent, but then they wanted to rule all of Spain, right? If you think of independent movements, they don't tend to want to do that. So that was the second sort of weird thing that I heard. And the third unusual thing that I heard was that the politics of Taiwan is so... a lot of people in Taiwan the democracy is so inefficient, so very inefficient, that some people in Taiwan, I mean, I'm sure they love their freedom, I'm sure of that. They probably love the civil liberties aspect of their system, but they really dislike the way politics is conducted, and they don't have this American view that on one side there's democracy and on the other side there's tyranny, and we always favor democracy and so on. But they think about it with more care, and they contrast. And as I said, 1 million of those have moved to mainland China. This would be as if Cubans from Miami swam back to Cuba. You know, these are things that you don't hear in the West or in America or in Europe, that so many Taiwanese are voluntarily migrating to mainland China. Now, the other thing that I was thinking is that Americans are always concerned about China. There are two things that Americans fear of China or are concerned about China. One is the lack of civil liberties, and the other one is the rise of China as a military power. And personally, from everything I heard here, that wouldn't be my concern about mainland China. My concerns about mainland China would be that it's adopting an American model of development, that it's a copy of America with all the flaws of America, and that according to The Economist, the last issue of The Economist that I read, China will be the country that pollutes the most, will take that prize away from America in 2 years, and by 2009, and that there's only 10 cars per 1,000 people in China right now, and as they move to the American model of 500 cars per 1,000 people, the oil consumption and carbon emission is going to go through the roof. So my biggest fear about China is that China will suck the planet dry of pure resources. And the second fear is inequality, like the tolerance of the communist Chinese for inequality is enormous. So the opportunities for unrest are enormous because there's such a division between the rich and the poor, which is also more related to the American model of development than the European model of development, which is less tolerant of inequities, which is the Taiwanese model, by the way, which is also less tolerant of inequities, or the Japanese model, which closely resembles the European model. So I think if we got China to be more like Japan, or more like Europe, and less like America, with less inequality, with a much more efficient GDP, unit of GDP per unit of energy consumed, as Japan, for example. It's a wonderful example. Japan is the most efficient nation on the planet in terms of the output compared to the unit of energy consumed, that the world would overall be a better place. So the biggest risk that I see is China imitating America on its environmental policies, on its military policies, and I think if the rest, Japan and Europe, manage to convince China of adopting more of our model, things would be better.